Hey, this is Karen, Coach's Corner Chats, and joining me is Sari Rose. Sari, where are you at and what are you up to?
So I am sitting in my office right now. My door just opened because my golden retriever Kevin just joined the conversation. So hopefully he'll be quiet. But I am based in Greensboro, North Carolina, and I work for US Youth Soccer, which is based out of Frisco, Texas.
And how long have you been a part of US Youth Soccer in that role?
Yeah, so I started with US Youth Soccer. I just had my year anniversary in the role of senior manager of Grassroots Soccer. It was a position that they created last year. I had been working with them on trying to grow the game in schools, and so had been on a project for a couple of years trying to basically train PE teachers and make sure they had equipment. So if kids wanted to play soccer and PE, the teachers felt comfortable to do it. And then that transitioned into this full-time position that I just had my 1 year anniversary. So pretty cool.
When you look back at that first year, what are some of the things like what were the highlights and maybe some things that you ran into obstacle wise?
So it's been interesting, right? So I came on board because we were really looking to continue to grow this school program. And, we basically go in and do professional development workshops for teachers, and then kind of work to get them equipment. And so initially coming in, right, in the next 10 years, we've got the World Cup, Men's World Cup. We've got, we just had the Gold Cup. We're going to potentially have the Women's World Cup. We're going to have the Olympics. So there's all this soccer that's happening. Um, and I am passionate about growing the game and trying to help kids through the game. So it was just fortunate that USYS came in and was like, hey, we want to grow Grassroots. So this year it was like, all right, we're jumping in. We now have somebody that's focused on school. But as we work with states, as we learn kind of what's happening across the country, we're trying to create opportunities and support people to grow the game, right? At the rec level, at schools and communities. And so my position's kind of been like, all right, we're doing this. Well, we could do this. Well, we should do this. So the new kind of approach is it's kind of two-pronged, right? So we know that soccer happens across the country in amazing places and communities, and people are doing it. And so my role is how can we support those people? So we're creating some stuff with a partnership through eTrain U. So we've got some free courses. We've got it's like $5 to become a member, and there's coaches courses, there's parent courses, there's player courses, right? And so we're just trying to help small organizations who can't necessarily spend the time sometimes to build curriculums and do stuff. We've got a partnership with Mojo for curriculum. So we're putting education out, we're putting curriculums out, and we're just trying to support people who are doing good work that need help. And then the other part of that is how can we grow the game? And so can we get resources to people who need resources? Can we connect people, right? State associations want to get involved. Here's some local people who are doing good work, but they need maybe coaching education or they need just financial support. And so, one part is can we make the game better where it is? And the other part is can we grow it where it isn't?
Why grassroots? Why is that such an important spot to focus on?
So, and I was a college coach for years and I've scouted, and I think, there's amazing things that can come from competitive soccer, right? We all know that. I think for me, when I was coaching college, I always spent time working with like the little kids at like an AYSO or, the U10 and under kids. And I just think what coaches don't realize is, kids love them, right? If they're fun, if they put out a good product and the product is like a fun session where the kids feel like somebody's listening to them, right? Where the kids have a say, and like kids want to come back, and you just have a lot of power as a coach. And I think as I got older, because I started working with like high school boys, and like I was at an at-risk school and I was coaching the boys team. But when I got into college coaching, like I enjoyed it. We were competitive, we did well, but I would go back and work with these younger kids. And I just realized that, if I told them not to squash a bug because, why would they squash it? Kids weren't squashing bugs, and they were like being kind to bugs. And, if we talked about making sure we shook hands after a game, they shook hands. And I guess I just realized that, like, winning and developing great players is awesome. And there's people who are so good at that they can break down games and they can strategize and they know how to develop world-class athletes. But what I found is that I really enjoyed using sport to kind of teach these life lessons and to, help kids just figure out, how to navigate the world, right? And so I just got to a point where I wanted to go back and kind of learn more. And so I was fortunate. I went to University of North Carolina, Greensboro, had this wonderful professor, Dr. Tom Martinick, who basically had these programs that, use sport to develop, responsibility and personal and social responsibility. And so I really got into that. And I'm really passionate, right? Like soccer kind of helped keep me in school. It helped to make me feel good about myself, maybe when I didn't as a kid. And I like the idea of helping kids. And so I came up to UNCG and started a program and learned more about it and got better at coaching and trying to pull out those opportunities where, you can empower kids, you can give them a chance to make decisions, you can just saying hi. Like, it's amazing. Kids would be like, like, every week you asked me how my day was, and nobody at school ever asks me that. And my parents aren't always home. And, I just think there's so much more to sport in terms of being able to bolster kids and develop their character and their resilience, that I just shifted to Grassroots. So I mean, I'm a competitive person. I can get into it. But I really found that sport just offers so many opportunities to impact kids. And I think the other part of that is clubs have so many layers to them, that when I was working for like our foundation here, NC Fusion created a foundation, kind of gave me like a blank sheet just to like go after it. It was like, we had kids that were good players and we could get them on a travel team, but we had all these kids that loved playing and loved coming out to like our just free Saturday soccer. And they wanted to be involved, and they wanted to get away from the apartment complexes where some of them weren't allowed out of the house unless a parent was home, or there were shootings. And, so we started to bring them up to the park just to volunteer at a tournament, and they would spend like 8 hours just like, they got food, they got to hang out, they got to watch soccer. And so we started to kind of realize that this club could create a lot of different opportunities for kids, right? Like, they could play on a competitive team, they could play on a rec team, they could come up and volunteer at tournaments, and they could get paid to help out with the facilities, and then we kind of delved into reffing, and we were like, all right, like, let's build leadership, and they need referees, and these kids are willing to just stay up here for 8 hours. So we really created this ecosystem where we found kids, we got them into a Saturday soccer program, they hung out, and then we sort of started to get to know them, and we're like, all right, you're a good player, like, we'll help you to be on a travel team. Like, all right, you're a good kid, you're not a really good player, but like, you can keep playing on this rec team with the other kids. And, why don't you maybe help us with this program, and you can kind of start coaching? Or, hey, you need money, and, we don't want you dropping out of this program to go work, at a fast food restaurant. So like, let's get you reffing, and now you can kind of choose your schedule, and you can still do after school stuff. So we realized just the club afforded I worked a lot with refugee kids, like they afforded these refugee and sort of low income families these opportunities to play, to work, to develop. And it was really eye-opening for me just to say, like, I think when I first took over, it was like, all right, how can we get these kids playing competitive soccer? Like, we want to make sure that competitive soccer is open to everyone. And it was like, you know what? Like, maybe it's better if this kid, doesn't aspire to necessarily like play in college, right? Like, we want to keep him playing, but like, let's open up. He could maybe be like a big time referee, right? Or like this kid really has potential as a coach, and how can we start to meet the kids where they're at and help them to navigate opportunities where they can always play, but you know what, you've got potential for coaching or reffing. Sorry, I get
Where
really passionate
has
and I like just
Oh, I love
apologize.
it. I love it. Where I was just about that was gonna be my next question is like, where's that passion come from? Not everyone, I heard refugees helping, young people that are in maybe not great like setups and surroundings and environments. Where did that kind of love of trying to help those that maybe aren't as fortunate, where did that come from? Is that like from parent type thing? Where did that love, that heart that's on your sleeve type thing come from?
I always joke because I do have this competitive and I have this kind of like tough side, and then I'm like, picking a worm off of the grass, right? And so my grandparents were awesome. I can remember as a kid looking at this list of like fives and tens on a notebook, and I asked my grandmother was old at the time; she was probably in her 90s, and I asked my aunt what are these fives and tens, and she's like, oh, your grandmother, like anybody that sends her like a request for money, like she'll give them $5 or $10. So like we're just looking at her donations for the year. So I mean, my grandparents were amazing. They were caring people. My mom was a special ed teacher. So when I was younger, I'd go in, and my mom is, she's got a big heart. My stepfather, I can remember like a house down the street had burned, and we didn't even really know the people, but like when we went grocery shopping, he bought like an extra bag of groceries and stuff. And so I think I had amazing family. But it did develop. I mean, I joke with my college coach how I can remember one camp, like I was working, for money, and I was like, man, I don't want to be with the kids, like little kids, man. I hate little kids, right? And now I coach my daughter's like U9 team, and so I think it develops. But I had really good family support, and I think the other thing is I've been fortunate to travel the world, and I've seen just kids in different places. I started working in an at-risk school right out of college. I went to Wake Forest, which is affluent, right? And I was a scholarship kid there, and then worked at this high school where there were some kids that, were really struggling. And you just start to realize like, there is an abundance of wealth in our country. And then there are a lot of places where, you would think you're in the third world, but you're just on one side of Greensboro. And so I started to kind of realize that like, hey, like this club just changed from Adidas to Nike, right? So like, what are they going to do with all that Adidas stuff, right? And so I just realized that I could, without asking people and putting them out, I could make people feel good about like, all right, you have no idea what you're doing with all this stuff. I can give it to all these kids who will wear it, right? And so I just started to look at those opportunities of like, hey, like you've got 4 kids, like you probably go through cleats like crazy. Like every time you're getting a new pair of cleat, like if you're not recycling it down to a child, can you give it to me and I'll find somebody, right? And so, I just started to do those things where I realized, I work for colleges where, you get cleats, you get shoes, you get gear, and it's amazing. And when you're a college athlete, like we needed all of that, right? But I started to realize that, I could siphon off some of the excess that I got to other people. And when I started to talk to other people, and they're like, man, I have like 5 of these shirts. Like I only need 2, take 3. And you just start to see how like little things can make a major difference. Right. So, you know, just I worked with North Carolina ODP and North Carolina Youth Soccer, and they get free stuff from Publix, and it's like, hey, you got all these soccer balls, you gave them out at State Cup, you have extra, like, can we just give it to a school so they have, every classroom has a ball for recess, right? And it's like no skin off of their back because they know next year they're going to get more Publix balls, and they do a fantastic job of giving everybody across North Carolina at State Cup a soccer ball, but they can take some of that extra and they can help a school that otherwise might not be able to play soccer. And so just helping, I think for me, seeing that and then helping other people to see that, because you want to feel good, right? It makes me feel good to help people, right? I mean, in some ways, I think that's like, I think that was a Friends episode, right? Where Phoebe was like trying to do something, altruistic. And it's like, but that made you feel good. And she's like, well, what if I do something that doesn't make me feel good, but helps somebody? And I think people sometimes, we run around and then we realize, like, wow, like me just giving something that I'm not using anymore can change this kid's life, right? It's new cleats to them, it's old cleats to me. And there's just so many good people out there that, if you just give them that hint of like, hey, next time you do spring cleaning, you've got a daughter who's the same age as this girl, can you pull that stuff aside for her? So I kind of got into it. Like I said, I'm like a jack of all trades. I always joke I maybe missed my opportunity as like a swap meet, like, give me $5, I get you here, but I like to connect the dots. And there's so many wonderful people out there that if you're like, hey, I know tryouts are different now. People don't use as many tryout shirts as they used to, like tournaments, everybody would just make tournaments and there'd be these leftover tournament shirts. Now they heat press them on site and stuff. But that kind of started, I opened up a bit. I'm like, these are all our extra shirts from tournaments. Like, I could find a home for these. Right. And so, people would joke, like, I think I saw one of your kids on the field. I'm like, why? And they're like, well, they had a Charlotte Independence or a Charlotte, what was it? They're the Independents now. They had a Carolina Rapids shirt on. And I'm like, there's no way like a kid on this side of town has a Carolina Rapids jersey. And I'm like, yeah, the Rapids are now Independents and they gave us all their stuff. And, like I said, it makes me feel good helping others. When I'm having a bad day, I can go out into the community and I can, see kids that are, playing soccer and having fun. It lifts me up. And then I can also help other people, lift them up by knowing that, whether they're volunteering or they're giving away stuff, that it's going to a good place. That was my long story.
So we've heard about the kind of philanthropic, like loving on others side, but you've also mentioned the competitive. What was the experience for you growing up that got you in the love of soccer as a youth and kind of going up? You talked about Wake Forest. What was the experience for you as a player coming up through the ranks?
Yeah. So I have 3 older brothers who none of them really got into sports. But like I said, I was a bit of a tomboy. And so, I played baseball and it was a way for me to like hang out with my friends playing baseball. And I kind of always played soccer. But it was really interesting. Like I played in middle school and I was on a boys team to start. They didn't have a girls team in my area. So there were like 3 of us that played on a boys team. I actually stopped playing on the boys team because I kind of got into a little fight with one of the boys, and lost my temper. I had a really bad temper growing up. And like he said something about me being in goal and how he was a better goalkeeper. And like, I think I went after him and, they had to like kind of calm me down. But I started playing in middle school and, on the team and met some friends who were playing. And, I had always played with some older girls. So when I was playing on the field because I was short in middle school. And when I got to high school, the older girls were like, hey, like our goalkeeper, like she's good, but like, we remember you being so good and you're taller now. Like, do you want to play back in goal? And I was just like, I was just off the chain, right? I had no training. I just like would go after balls. I'd catch them. I'd come out. Like I was just wild. But my friend's dad was the coach of like the team that always won state cup and, the team that went to regionals. And he was like, listen, like you've got a lot of potential. Do you want to come out? Our current goalkeeper's a really good basketball player and she's going to probably transition to all basketball and we need someone. And, so I had a good freshman year, high school, and then went to this travel team. And then they asked me to go out for ODP. And this is probably why I have a special place in my heart for ODP, because I went out for ODP and I was like the best of the worst. So like in my age group were 2 or 3 people who were like regional level goalkeepers, right? But they needed to, because you were on the region team at that time, like you automatically made the state team. So they needed to find like the next 2 or 3 people. And so it was like, okay, she's got potential. And so I made the ODP team. But like at that time, I was really fortunate. Like my head coach, I think, was the coach at Villanova. My assistant coach became the coach at Rutgers. And all of the assistant coaches, I was a New Jersey ODP, right? So like all of the New Jersey assistant coaches were Rutgers players. So like when you learn about the power of a role model, I went from being this like, you know, like I didn't wear gloves at first because I didn't think they like gloves would worsen my grip. And I was so naive and so raw. And then I end up, you know, like getting selected for this ODP team. And I'm around not only great players, but I'm around these like college age females who, I mean, Saskia Weber, who made the national team, I guess my senior year, but she was at Rutgers and, you know, she's out there instructing me. Tim Mulqueen, who was with Orlando City, was like my goalkeeper coach. And all of a sudden, as a sophomore in high school, I'm surrounded by not only these amazing coaches, but also these amazing role models. And I just ate it up, right? I loved it. Like I would just go up to the field and like practice by myself. And like, you know, I remember my team went to state cup and I didn't really know how to punt well. And a girl on my team was like, you need to get better at that. And I like I lived by a park and I just borrowed a bag of soccer balls and I just practiced punting every day. Like, how can I get better? But I did. I started going up to Rutgers and I got to train with Tim Mulqueen and I got to train with Saskia Weber. And I had this group of really good goalkeepers, right? There were kids on the regional team and then there was me. I met my best friend. I'll give her a shout out, Mandy Risden, because we were both sort of selected. And, you know, she always lived an hour away, but her dad was like a superstar dad. And so he would always bring us the stuff. And I started going to camps. I started doing everything. And my like trajectory from like a sophomore to a senior was crazy. And at the time, you know, I mean, I'm old, right? So this was like, I was a freshman in 94 in high school. And I remember going to WAGs and, Wake Forest was starting a program and like it was one of their men's assistants saw me. And, you know, I knew Wake Forest because I was a big college basketball fan and Tim Duncan had hit a couple free throws to beat Duke his freshman year. So all of a sudden I'm like looking at schools and, you know, Wake Forest sends me stuff and I'm like, all right, I'll go on a recruiting trip, right? Like I was looking at Cornell, the Rutgers goalkeeper had just gotten injured. So they like weren't looking at me, but then they started to, and I was looking at like Villanova and all these Northern schools. And I went down there and, you know, the coach at the time was this guy, Chris Turner, who could sell ice to an Eskimo. You know, so I'm on this recruiting trip and I meet Tim Duncan and they're like, you could work for the basketball team as part of, you know, like you'll be on scholarship, but you'll have work study. And, you know, I met Dave Odom and I went and saw all these basketball players and I was like, sold, right? You know, like Cornell who. So yeah, I went down to Wake and, you know, we were bad my freshman year. I mean, like we were in the ACC, but we didn't have a ton of scholarships. And, you know, I think we opened up against Duke. And I remember the first shot was from this woman, Kelly. She used to be Walbert. Now she's Kelly Cagle. She's a fantastic player, but like I caught it and I was like, oh my God, like, you know, like things just got real. But it was, you know, I was there and then I think we made it to the NCAA tournament my junior year, right? We got better. And then Tony DeLuz came in, who's amazing. He's still at Wake. And I said I had a bit of an attitude. And so like I had redshirted my sophomore year, didn't have a great junior year. You know, or maybe I redshirted my junior year, but like, you know, I kind of had a little bit of an attitude and, you know, I didn't play much my senior year and we ended up losing in the NCAA tournament. I had to come in and play and we got smoked by Carolina. And I was like, I don't want to go out like this, right? Like it was 5-0. I was a train wreck. And so I can remember going for like a run with my coach in the spring and I was like, I think I want to stay. And he's like, we already gave your scholarship away, you know? And I'm like, okay. And so I applied for grad school. They had funding for like these master teachers. And I remember being like, well, you know, I went to see him again. I was like, I think I have this scholarship. And he's like, well, you know, we're bringing in a pretty good goalkeeper and so-and-so is returning. And, you know, like you can come out, you know, but like, it was really funny. I mean, like we went in for the spring and everybody's coming out like, he wants me to, you know, increase this and, you know, I've got to get this. And there's all these expectations. And I went in and he was like, what do you want to do? And I'm like, well, you told the other goalkeeper she should do this. And he's like, yeah, like, just what do you want to do? And he was pretty cold, but that spring I just committed to it. And I came in and I like lost weight and then got stronger. And I did. I think I finished, we always joke, like I finished first for like, you had to do all these different tests, like agility or like, the 2-mile tests, the beep test, Sebco National, and my composite score, like I was top on the team. And I can remember we went to our first, our first games, and I got my key and there was like somebody else's name on it. And then it was crossed off with mine. Cause like, he didn't think I was going to travel, So it was, I'm talking about it, but like I did, my team ended up being, I think, as high as maybe like 15th in the nation my 5th year. And, we went to the NCAA tournament, and, I got to see us like when we were terrible. And then I got to be a leader, and the goalkeeper who was a freshman when I was a 5th year was amazing. And we kind of went back and forth. And, I can remember somebody asking me one time why I didn't play. I'm like, cause like, those saves she made, like, I can't make those. Like, I'm organized and I'm older and I'm a leader now, but like, she's really good. So I got to be a mentor. And like I said, it was a good experience for me to mature, and kind of come into my own as a leader. And Tony was amazing. And kind of, like I said, he was kind of put me out there, but then when I came back and did what he asked, he really brought me in. And he's been, I always joke, cause he's kind of a dry sense of humor, but he's always kind of been like in the background, like helping out. And, if I need something. So, Tony DeLuz at Wake has been awesome. But I mean, I was never great enough to probably play professionally. And at the time there weren't a ton of opportunities. And I just, I kind of fell into, I went and taught for a couple of years. And once again, I loved working with the kids, but, I'm not always great with administrators or stuff like that. So I went into college coaching, and I just enjoyed, helping players develop on and off the field. So once again, a long answer.
What is it about challenges? You seem to like to step up to challenges. Like even the 5th year, like most people would have said, hey, I got to play college soccer. I enjoyed it. And then even to come back, not even know if you're going to get a spot or get to travel. What is it about, like, okay, I'm going to put the time in. I'm going to show you that I can do. I'm going to step up to the challenge. Even the step of, I've been teaching, but now I want to go into coaching. What's it about, like, stepping up to those opportunities?
I think it's something where, once again, I grew up with older brothers, so I was always having to try and compete for everything. And I do. I mean, I think I joke, because I think in some ways I'm very egocentric and I like to stand out, right? I like to get that attention. But I also think it's something where, for me, I think, we're sort of, and I'm not really a religious or philosophical, right? But I think like we're kind of put on this earth, we're given certain talents, and, I think it's, can we max out? And you don't want to have any regrets, right? Like I left after my senior year having a miserable game to end on. And I just felt like I hadn't, like, that's not how I wanted to go out. And that's not the best that I can do, right? Like I could do more, I could give more. And so I think, once again, you're on this earth, and can you max out your time here? And, I'm not somebody that's like necessarily going to climb Everest, right? Like I'm not, there's certain things that I know are not things that I feel like I need to accomplish, but I do feel like anything I do, I want to give the best that I can. We have a joke with a friend, and it's like, I'm not a bitch. I just have a disdain for mediocrity, right? Like I'm not, like if I'm going to do something, I feel like it's my name out there and it's my reputation and it's who I am. And so I want to make sure that I am, trying to do the best, and trying to leave that imprint. And I don't do it across everything, right? Like but I want to make sure that I'm doing the best that I can, and can I help people as much as I can, or that I'm capable of.
What was that transition from, I've been a player and now I'm going to go to the coaching side? What was that like for you in terms of, when you look back, going from player to coach?
Well, I think anybody, Kevin's talking in the background. I think it's hard, right? Like just because you're a good player doesn't mean you're a good coach, right? And I think for me, I came in and I don't think I was the best. I think I took for granted being around good coaches. Like I wish I had I wish I had written down sessions. I wish I had taken notes. For me, it was like coming back and relearning how to do stuff, right? Like I always joke as a goalkeeper, you toss a ball and I'm like a dog, I'm going to dive after it. But going into coaching, I had to break down like, well, what is the steps and process of diving and kind of learned.
Mm.
So it was hard, right? Because I am competitive and I want people to give the best. And I would get frustrated if kids weren't. And I think I was trying to be like tough to prove that I needed to be there. And that's probably the worst thing. But I also, like I said, like connecting with kids, right? Like my high school boys were one of the best teams that I ever coached because they were such the bad news bears. And like we had these things, like we set goals, and one of the goals was like nobody was going to get in a fight and get kicked out that year, right? Like our number one rule is like we're not going to look bad like that, right? Like nobody's going to fight, right? And and we're never going to lose by more than 5, and we're going to go 500, right? Like low expectations, but but I think for me and reflecting on it, right, is like meeting kids where they're at, meeting people where they're at, right? Like I remember getting on a player once because I'm like, come on, like I'm offering you to come out early. Like I'm telling you what you need to work on, right? Like and she's like, she was a walk-on. She's like, I'm okay not playing, right? Like I enjoy being on the team. Like one of my goals was to make the team. And I know like we have this opening at center back and like I could fill it, but like I also like that's not necessarily my goal. And so it kind of was like, whoa, like not everybody wants to be the best, right? And so I think for me, the learning experience of understanding relationships with people and how, like I used to joke, people are like, oh, you did an individual session with my daughter and now she's so much better this weekend. I'm like, listen, like your daughter is good, but like we talked about like why she's afraid to try stuff in the game, right? And I'm like, listen, this game, like I'm not even there. So like we worked on some stuff, like just go out there, have fun. I'm not going to know whether you were successful or not, only you are. So just like do it. And I just realized that like you can get so much more out of kids if you build a relationship. You can get so more out of people if you make them believe in themselves. And so for me, and I have an amazing person who was like I said, Denise Reddy, who's now with Chelsea. She was one of my assistants for ODP. And, she was so tough and so amazing as a college player and really like helped me get better and train me. We went to lunch and she's like, you were competitive. Like, how do you work with just like, like kids that are just learning how to play or like, ragtag kids? I'm like, you find like the wins, right? So for me to show up on a Saturday and kids are organizing a field, like that's a huge win because they used to just show up and like had no thought of like, hey, coach isn't here. It's getting late. Maybe we should start getting organized, right? So it's like, I think I'm still really competitive, but it's not about like wins and losses. It's not about like how many kids did I put to the next level of play. It's like looking at kids and meeting them where they're at and being, very cognizant of like, this kid's win might not necessarily be him making that team. Like this kid's win is him, being a better teammate, right? Because he's a good kid and he's the best kid here. But like we had a conversation with one of our refugee boys, right? And he's so athletic and he's amazing with his right foot. And we were always like, we let him play on our rec team in the off season. And I'm like, but you're not really allowed to use your right foot unless you have to, because you're the best player out here. And you can score all the goals for our team and you can do everything you want against these other kids. Your goal is to use this time to get better for your competitive team. So instead of being on like the gold team, you're on like, the top team in the club, right? Like you're at the national level, right? And this past year, he just got brought up to the top team in the club. But like in talking with him and working with him, we were like, your job is to help the people around you be better, because If not, like, you really don't need to be out here because you're the best player anyway. And this is just like, you could dice through these people, but like, we want to help you develop the other things. So when you go back with your team, and like, we had a kid who's terrible. I mean, he's terrible. He's absolutely, in my interview, I actually have my doctorate. And so I worked with the refugee kids as part of my dissertation. And I thought we were going to do all these amazing things like self-determination theory, build their competence and, make them better. And, I'm interviewing him and I'm like, well, how do you feel about your improvement over the year? And he like deadpan, he's like, I suck at soccer. I'm like, oh God, this is my dissertation. And he's like, but like, I know that you believe in me, and I know that Coach Claire believes in me, and I know that like if I work hard, like I'm gonna get better. And I also know that like I'm the leader, because he speaks Swahili and there were some other kids that don't speak English and they were very good players. And he was the one that always made sure they knew what time and where to meet. And he's like, and I know like we won't have a team if I'm not telling everybody, but it's like, that's a win for him, right? Like my goal is for him is like, I just want you to graduate high school, right? Like I want you to, I want you to know that like you can be a leader. And so, when she asked me like, you're so competitive, like, how do you operate where like you're working with people that may not win, you're working with kids that like don't want to move on to college, they're just having fun. And I'm like, you meet them where you're at and you find the things that are going to be the wins for them, right? Like the kid who passes the ball when they've always been a ball hog, right? The kid who asks, can I go get the water for you, when they've always been so selfish and just shown up to play, right? Like those are the wins. And I think sport has an amazing power. They talk about it being like the hook, but I think it has an amazing power to bring kids together. We had kids we had our Vietnamese kids would never hang out with our Central African kids, and now like they're friends. But like 6-7 years ago, it was like, you're here, we're not from the same community. And so it has the power to bring people together. It has the power to really teach lessons. Dan Gould once said, character is taught, not caught. I think coaches, and I'm not saying bad coaches that don't recognize the power that they have and are just thinking like, I've got to make this kid better and I've got to win, I think miss out on making sport, a tool to develop kids, right? Like making sport a tool to develop better humans, right? Like they might win, but like, have they taught those kids some of those lessons that are going to transcend to school, that are going to transcend to their home, that are going to transcend to the community? And I think you can win and teach those lessons, but I think sometimes we get so focused on the wins, or we get so focused on teaching skills, that we forget kids will probably be better players and they'll be better people if we, engage them and build a relationship and, try and empower them to do more. So long answer again.
How long were you in the college coaching at that level? And then what started to give you the thought of, maybe I want to get into something a little bit different, and to the spot that you're at now?
Yeah. So I started at Butler University, go Bulldogs. Once again, made nothing my first couple of years, and I was there for 3 years. And then my best friend who I met through ODP was at Rutgers with Glenn Crooks, who was my ODP coach, and she was moving on. And so I kind of went for bagels one time when I was home at spring break, and he offered me a job, and I was at Rutgers, and, Carly Lloyd was there and the team was fantastic. But I had certain goals, right? Like I wanted to be with the top 25 team. I didn't know if I wanted to be a head coach yet. And, I wanted to be more involved. And so I was offered a position at UNC Charlotte, which got me back down to North Carolina, where I enjoyed living. And I got to rebuild a program there with John Lipsitz. And, we did well, right? We had a top recruiting class, top 25 or something. And we ended up making the NCAA tournament. We won our conference. And I kind of felt like I had accomplished some of these like coaching things, but I had friends who wanted to be national team coaches, but like, I didn't feel like that was my strength. And I didn't really want to be a national team coach. And I just realized like what I was good at was connecting with kids, building confidence. And, and so, like I said, I had always worked with young players, but I started reading about this gentleman. I have my assistant at Wake was a professor at UNCG who had been a mentor. And I had always thought about maybe sports psych, but then I started learning about community youth sport development. And I'm like, this is my alley, right? Like I'm a good coach. I'm not a fantastic strategist. Like I don't eat up watching game and breaking things down. Like I like learning, but I don't know if I want to be a head coach. And so, yeah, so I went back and then I just started to see like you can have such an impact on kids and communities. And, so I was a college coach for like 9 years or 7 years, I guess, where I was like full time. And then I kind of volunteered, goalkeeper, female, they can always use you. And then I worked for a foundation for 6 years. And then transitioned to USYS. So.
And when it came to that transition, was that when you started to get more into like the foundational work and you got to start working with some of the youth and what have you? Did that just kind of spark and you're like, yeah, this is the direction I want to go?
Oh yeah. I mean, the beauty of it is your life could be absolute chaos, but if you show up to a field or a gym and there's little kids that are like, Coach Sari, and they're like high-fiving you and giving you hugs, like you can't be in a bad mood. I mean, and I work with programs where it is like, we've got 4 different people trying to get people here. And, sometimes I wake up 2 hours before a session because we're coordinating travel. And, I was living a crazy, crazy life trying to make all these things happen for other people. But like, even on the worst day where like, a kid didn't show up when they were supposed to, somebody got mad at you, when you roll up to the field and kids are having fun and kids are excited to see you. I mean, like I said, it's very selfish in some ways, right? Like I show up and I'm like, yeah, high five, so yeah, once I started working in the community and once I started kind of seeing, the kids and how excited they were for programs and, how it made me feel to help, I was locked in. And, coming to USYS, like I had a really hard time because I was very invested in our community here in Greensboro. And I didn't want to leave initially to take another job. But I have 2 kids of my own. And I used to joke, like, I'm a fantastic mom to, 35, refugee kids across Greensboro, but then I come home late or I'm missing soccer games or I'm kind of, I'm tired. So I maybe have a little less patience with my daughter than I did with the 45 kids that I dealt with that day. And so I kind of realized that, there were people who could take over and help in the community. And if I was living here, I could still help. But I wanted to, devote more time to my family and have a little more of that 9 to 5 as opposed to, running around on the soccer fields until 10 o'clock at night and driving through communities. And I felt like, USYS sort of offered the opportunity if I could do it right. And if I could get the right support to kind of help more people to see soccer in the way that I did and do programming. And there's so many amazing organizations out there. So, how could we support them? And then how could we get more people to recognize, how they can impact their community? And so that's kind of, I think the goal with USYS is, very supportive of me. My boss in sport development is an amazing guy, Tom Condone. Same thing. He's kind of given me a little bit of a blank slate to grow programs and kind of help and figure out what are the needs. I think one of the things I learned early in outreach, and I think it serves well in my new position, is like you have ideas of what you think should happen. And then when you talk to people and you learn what they're doing and then what their needs are, it allows you to better serve them. Right. So it's like, we have this school program. We're like, we're going to do this and we're going to go and we're going to do it this way. And then all of a sudden after a year, we're like, okay, we're going to change it a little bit and we're going to, make it a little bit different. And so I think that's kind of where I'm at, is I'm learning as I'm growing. I always tell people, 1, I'm from Jersey, so I can kind of get straight to the point. But 2, I'm always coming from a place for like, how can I help people? And so if I've stepped on toes, if I've done something that goes against what you're trying to do, then just talk to me, right? Like, let me know that I'm doing something that goes against what you're trying to do, or, I'm over exerting myself in a certain area because, like I said, I see grassroots soccer as an opportunity where, one, we can get kids playing and we can help support coaches so that everybody's trying to do the right thing, but sometimes they're not aware of what that is, or they're not aware of, they want the kids to get better. And if they just go through cones, they're going to build repetition, but like going through cones is boring, and going through cones, doesn't necessarily teach the game. Right. And so now we have more free flowing activities, right? Parents are like, well, if I drive my kid loves soccer. So if I drive my kid an hour and a half, at 10, each way to practice to this better club, then they're going to be a better player at 16. And I'm like, yes, but your kid loves playing now at 10. And when they're 14 and for 4 years, they've been driving 3 hours for practice, they're probably not maybe going to enjoy it as much. So like, if you're in a good club and if you like your coach and if you feel like your kid's developing, then like do that. Right. And then when they're 12 and if they still are loving it, now they're still psyched because they can drive for the next 6 years, as opposed to driving from 10 to 16 and quitting. They're now driving from, 14 or 12 to 18. And now they've had this extended. And, I try and always be really reflective. US soccer teaches us to be really reflective, but I reflect on conversations. I reflect on actions. I reflect on, man, I just put my foot in my mouth, or God, that was stupid, or wow, I should apologize because I was kind of a, jerk to that person. So, there's some people who probably love me and there's some people who probably think I'm the worst person in the world. And I probably spend more time wondering, how I could have maybe changed so that person doesn't think I'm the worst person in the world. But yeah. And like I said, US soccer is really, US youth soccer, I think, is committed. I think they recognize the opportunities to grow the game in the next 10 years. And I think they're willing to, for me, I think my boss and our CEO realizes like there's ECNL, there's AYSO, there's Upward, there's US Club, there's all these different opportunities for people, right? And at the competitive level, everybody is fighting for, are you going to be ECNL? Are you going to be USYS? Are you going to be US Club? Are you going to be DPL, EPL? There's all these soups. But for me, I look at like, let's fight over that. Let's try and put out the best product. But at the base of the pyramid, let's try and engage everybody to make better experiences for kids, help volunteers to be better coaches, help parents to understand that, like, don't quit gymnastics at 8 because you need to go full time at soccer, right? Like, it's okay we want kids experimenting. And so I think what we're trying to do and what I'm trying to do is, can we help to cross some of those lines? We've got this grassroots symposium coming up in September. We were very adamant that we wanted it to be really inclusive. So like Vince Gansberg is a great friend of mine. He's an amazing coach. You probably know who he is. He's now with US Club. And I was like, hey, like, even though he's at US Club and we're USYS, like, can we have him engaged and can we have him involved? And so he's on our committee. We have somebody from the director from AYSO is on our committee. And we brought probably 30 people together, and we're like, hey, we are all experts in our area. We're all doing great work. We've got, JT Dorsey from the JT Dorsey Foundation, Tony Santa from the Tony Santa Foundation, right? Like, and we asked the question, one, you're now 10 years into being a foundation person. What would you have wanted to know your first year? And what are the questions that we can answer? And now that you're 10 years in, how can we support you? And so this grassroots symposium, which is really piggybacked on what the US Soccer Foundation did with the Urban Soccer Symposium, is like, okay, let's bring some of these people in and let's ask the questions, and then let's create a lineup of workshops that can support people. We're fortunate, right? Because we piggybacked it on the USYS Leadership Summit. So we know the presidents and executive directors are going to be there for a couple of days. And then we're bringing in all these people from grassroots organizations and the rec director in a state and the community foundation person in a state. And so there's Saturday is this like crossover. And so we brought all these people together because we want to figure out how we can answer questions across organizations. And we want to, I think there's a lot of really good conferences out there, one of the things that we've tried to be really deliberate about is like, I don't want to hear what you did. I want to hear what you're doing and how you're going to connect that to what somebody else can do. So people who are presenting are not just saying like, I had this amazing program in Greensboro and we got kids coaching and reffing and leading, but it took like tremendous work on me as an individual. And unless you want to commit 90 hours a week in your area, like it's going to be hard for somebody else to recreate that, right? Like what we want is for people to come in and like we have people on development, and it's, part of it is fundraising. Like we know that you're running a program and you have no time to really commit to fundraising, but so we're going to tell you, here are some things, and things that you can do and how you can create your own development plan and how you can, fundraise or add to your fundraising, right? Like we know you're running programs. Here's somebody who's going to come in and give you some more things to think about of how to incorporate this into your after school program. We're having people from the States talk about the stuff that they're doing and how people can get involved. And the whole thing, which I steal from Evan Dabby of New Jersey, is not just like, this is what I did, but more of, okay, how can you do something in your community? And so people can choose, hey, we want to start with reffing, or we need help with fundraising, or we want to start a program, or we want to empower kids. And so there's these workshops that are going to hopefully provide people with takeaways that they can then go back to their community. But in addition to that, we're being really deliberate with like networking. So like Friday night is a networking event, right? Saturday, everybody's going to go to the Minnesota United game and they're going to be able to talk. And we're doing these luncheons where people are going to engage. And we're not necessarily having big speakers, although we've got a couple of like an opening and a closing one that we'll announce, but like we want it to be discussions. So like when I leave the event, I met you at the convention, right, Karen? It's like, hey, Karen, like, yep, let's go and do this, right? So it's going to be trying to bring people together so you can leave with some resources. And then USYS is going to kind of try and create monthly check-ins where, if you want to check in, great. But if you don't, no worries. And so, like I said, the things that I see are, you have passionate people, but they're one person and they need support. You have clubs and you have, state associations that maybe have some resources and they're trying to figure out how best to use them. And so how can we connect those dots? I joke, I'm like, this is either going to be awesome or in another year, I'm going to be, trying to find another job because it was, but, we've got some lofty goals and we're going to hit some road bumps, but, we're always coming at it from how can we make it so that a kid that plays soccer at 5 doesn't stop playing because they had a bad experience, right? We know there's natural attrition. We know kids will pick other sports, but we want to get kids, when they get engaged in the game, they've got a great environment and they love it. And if they try and play something else, then they're still going to be a fan of the game. And they still may want to play pickup, right? People play pickup basketball all the time, but can we get people that are going to still want to play pickup soccer when they're, 14, 15, 20? So a lot of goals, a lot of initiatives, but it's all coming back to how can we make soccer a safe, positive environment where kids are going to want to play. Kids are going to, want to develop. Kids may have different opportunities along the way. And it's not like, oh, you're just a rec player. Or, oh, you're a referee. It's like, no, it's cool. Like you play and you ref, or you play and you also volunteer to coach at your, community. Yeah. I'm a talker. I'm sorry.
No, you're awesome. And that is a perfect way to shut this chat down. This is Kieran with Sari Rose, and I'm out. Peace.